Hello everyone, I am Mr. Night Truth. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax, and let's go down into the story.
Story number 1. They say Wallace Troy vanished in 1914, but that isn't true. I know because I saw what really happened. Though if I tell you, you'll think I was the one who made him disappear. They say Wallace Troy disappeared in 1914, but that isn't the truth. I know what really happened to him because I was there, and if I told you everything, you'd probably think I made him vanish myself. Now, before you start thinking I'm confessing to something, let me set the record straight. Wallace was already a dead man walking long before that night. Everyone in town knew it. They said he was reckless, that he had no respect for rules, no fear of the law, and no patience for the whispers that haunted these mountains. He was proud of that, wore it like a badge, but pride like his, it was always going to get him killed. I remember the last time I saw him alive, sitting on the back step of the general store, rolling a cigarette with those big clumsy fingers. He grinned when he saw me, smoke curling from the corner of his mouth, and said, "One more run, that's all I need. Then I'll have enough to buy my way out of this hole." "Your runs are going to get you strung up," I told him. He laughed, a sharp bark that turned a few heads on Main Street. "Not this one. I found a trail nobody dares use. Cuts right through the hills. Half the time, half the risk." The way he said it made my skin crawl. There were places around here you didn't go, not even for money. Places the old folks called forbidden ground. Not cursed exactly. No one ever used that word, but marked, watched. We grew up with the warnings, and most of us listened. Wallace didn't. I leaned closer and lowered my voice. "You're talking about the ridge behind Miller's Hollow, aren't you?" He didn't answer, not with words, just gave me that grin again, the one that made you wonder if he knew something you didn't. Now, here's the part I can't explain without sounding guilty. I could have stopped him. I could have gone to the sheriff, or his kin, or even followed him out and dragged him back, but I didn't. I just watched him finish that cigarette, watched him tuck his flask back into his coat, and let him go. And yet, I didn't let him go, not really, because later that evening, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned the color of old bruises, I found myself walking the same trail he'd bragged about. Don't ask me why. Curiosity maybe, or fear for him, or maybe I just wanted to see what would happen. The hills were quiet that night, too quiet. No owls, no coyotes, not even the rustle of deer in the underbrush. Just the crunch of my boots and the faint slosh of moonshine in the jug I carried for cover. If anyone stopped me, I could claim I was on my own run. That was the plan anyway. I swear I saw Wallace ahead of me on the trail more than once, his shape bobbing between the trees, his shoulders squared like always, moving with that cocky swagger. But every time I hurried to catch up, he slipped just out of sight. Here's where things get tricky. Because the trail I followed, well, I'd never seen it before. Not marked on any map, not used by hunters or loggers. The trees grew so thick overhead the moonlight barely touched the ground. Roots coiled across the path like snakes, and every step felt heavier, like the earth. Wanted me to turn back. I should have. I know that now. But then I saw it, a marker. Not the kind you find on hiking trails. No blaze of paint or carved arrow. This was different. 3 stones stacked on top of each other, balanced too neatly to be an accident. Beside it hung something, from a branch, a strip of cloth, faded and stiff, tied in a knot I couldn't untangle. Wallace had told me once that signs like that weren't warnings. They were boundaries, and boundaries weren't meant to be crossed. I crossed anyway. Further along, I caught up to him, or thought I did. He was leaning against a tree, flask in hand, smirking like I'd fallen into his trap. "Didn't think you'd follow," he said. "I didn't," I told him. But that wasn't true, was it? I had followed. I always follow, even when I tell myself I don't. "Place is nothing," he said, gesturing at the dark woods around us. "Just trees, just fear in people's heads. I'll be through by dawn, and no one will be the wiser." His voice carried too loud in that silence. I wanted to hush him, to drag him back, but I didn't. I only stood there, waiting. Here's the strange part. The next thing I remember, he wasn't leaning against that tree anymore. He wasn't anywhere. The flask was there, lying on the ground, where he'd dropped it, but Wallace himself had vanished like smoke. I called his name. Once, twice, the trees swallowed my voice. And then I heard it. Drumming. Faint at first, like the echo of my own heartbeat. Then louder, steadier, pulling me forward the way a river pulls a branch. I knew I shouldn't follow it, but I did. The trail narrowed, twisted. My lantern sputtered, and just as I was about to turn back, I saw a glow ahead. Not lantern light, not fireflies, something larger. Firelight, flickering against the trunks of trees. That's when I knew Wallace hadn't just found a shortcut. He'd trespassed, and in these hills, trespass has a cost. I won't tell you what I saw right then. Not yet. That belongs to the next part of the story. But I'll say this. Wallace Troy's last run didn't end with the law, or a rival gang, or even bad luck. It ended because he crossed into ground that didn't belong to him. Ground that belonged to people who never wanted to be found, and once they saw him, they never let him go. I should have turned back when I saw the fire, but the truth is, I didn't. Or maybe I couldn't. Funny thing is, when I think about it now, I can't quite remember if I walked toward it on my own, or if someone was already leading me. The glow cut through the trees like a wound. The closer I crept, the more I realized it wasn't just a single fire, but a scattering of them. Torches stuck in the ground in a rough circle. And around that circle, figures, people, men and women dressed in clothes that didn't belong to a 1914 or any year I knew. Deer hides, rough linens, faces streaked with ash and ochre. They moved in silence at first, like shadows. I remember holding my breath so hard my chest ached. I told myself I was hidden, crouched low behind the ferns, but this is where it gets messy. I sometimes recall standing among them shoulder to shoulder, like I belonged there. Both memories feel true, though they can't be. What I do know is this. Wallace was already in their circle. He must have walked right up, bold as brass, thinking they'd barter with him, or maybe laugh at his nerve. He always believed he could talk his way out of anything. But when I saw him, his bravado had slipped. His hands were tied behind his back with braided cord, and there was blood on his temple where someone had struck him. I wanted to shout his name, I swear I did, but my throat locked. The only sound I managed was a gasp, and even that felt too loud. Some of the figures turned their heads toward where I hid. Their faces caught the torchlight, painted eyes, streaks of red across their cheeks, bone charms dangling from their necks. One of them smiled. I can still see those teeth, yellow and sharp like an animal's. Now, If you're wondering why they didn't drag me out then and there, I don't have an answer. Sometimes I think they didn't see me at all. Other times I'm sure they did, but they let me stay, let me watch, maybe even welcomed me. Because here's another slip of memory. I recall a woman's hand on my arm. Rough skin, the smell of smoke clinging to her. She whispered something in a tongue I didn't know, yet somehow understood. Words about crossing boundaries, about belonging. But when I blink, that moment vanishes, and I'm back in the undergrowth, frozen. Which version's the truth? You tell me. What I can't deny is the land itself bore signs of their claim. Totems stood at the edges of the clearing, shapes carved from cedar, slick with animal fat. Some looked human, others not. A few were strung with bones, little finger-sized, ones that clacked softly in the breeze. Those weren't decorations. They were warnings. Wallace had ignored every single one. He tried to speak then, to reason with them. "I ain't meanin' no harm," I heard him say. His voice shook, but still carried that stubborn edge. "Just cutting through. Don't care what you're doing out here. I'll be gone by morning." The figures didn't answer. Not in English anyway. They murmured among themselves in that same low language, voices rising and falling like the drumming I'd heard earlier, and then, as one, they turned back to Wallace. They pushed him down to his knees. He cursed, bucked, spat blood at the feet of the one who seemed to lead them. A tall man, bare-chested despite the cold, chest smeared with black ash. The leader lifted a hand and the murmurs stopped. The whole clearing went silent, even the fire snapping quieted like it had been commanded. And then the drums began again. I swear I hadn't seen them before. Two boys, maybe teenagers, crouched by stretched hides, beating them with sticks. The rhythm wasn't fast, but heavy, slow, each strike like a heartbeat buried deep in the earth. I don't know how long it went on. Minutes, hours, it all bled together. But during that time, Wallace's eyes found mine. He saw me, yes. Even if I'd been hiding, he saw me. His mouth moved around words I couldn't hear, but I knew what. He was saying, "Help me, please." And here's the part I hate most. I didn't move, or maybe I did. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I remember stepping closer to him, close enough that his sweat and fear stung my nose. I remember someone pressing something into my hands, a torch maybe, and urging me forward. Was I part of them already, or was I still watching from the dark? I can't give you a clean answer, but I can tell you what happened next. The tall man raised his hand again, and two others lifted Wallace to his feet. He struggled, kicked, shouted curses that cracked his voice. One of them struck him across the mouth, splitting his lip. He spit blood again, but this time it landed in the dirt. Fimoine, woman with the rough hand, if she was real, stepped forward and drew a circle around him in the dirt with a branch. As she did, the drumming shifted, faster, sharper, like it was pushing the night itself to lean in closer. I couldn't stand it anymore. "Let him go!" I think I yelled. Or maybe I whispered. My throat burned with the effort, but no one turned, no one stopped. It was like my voice didn't matter. Wallace shouted too, though. "You can't keep me here." His eyes darted to me again, wide and wild. Tell him I don't belong here." But I didn't. Or maybe I did. Yeet. Last clear image I have of that night is Wallace's face, twisted with rage and fear, the firelight painting him red, then rough hands, mine, theirs, shoved him forward, deeper into that circle. The drums pounded louder, and when the chanting began, it sounded less like a language and more like the forest itself speaking through them. That's where I'll stop, for now. Because the next part is harder to admit, harder to explain. But I promise you this, Wallace Troy's disappearance wasn't just a matter of him walking off into the hills and never coming back. He was taken, claimed, and I might have been the reason why. You ever notice how memory doesn't work in straight lines? Sometimes I see that night like it's carved in stone, every detail sharp. Other times, it unravels, like someone spliced two different reels together and told me both were true. That's what it's like remembering the ceremony. Wallace was still in the circle when it started. That part I know. His wrists bound, his chest heaving, his eyes flicking between me and the clan that surrounded him. He wanted me to help, but he also hated me for being there. I could see it plain as day. The suspicion, the fury, maybe even the knowledge that I'd led him into this. The drums didn't stop. They rolled on until my own pulse matched them. The sound didn't feel like something you heard with your ears. It pressed into your bones, your teeth. It carried words I couldn't understand, yet I understood them anyway. The leader raised his arms. The fire behind him flared, though no one touched it. His voice broke through the chant, deep and harsh, speaking that same old tongue. The people answered him, every one of them, in unison. And here's where it splits again. In one memory, I'm crouched behind the ferns, peering through the gaps, terrified I'll be caught. In another, I'm inside the circle, torch in hand, my own voice rising with theirs. Both feel true. Both feel like sins. Wallace shouted over them, his voice raw. You don't scare me. You're just savages playing at ghosts. But his defiance rang hollow. The ropes cut deeper as he struggled, and no one flinched at his words. If anything, they seemed amused. One of the women approached him, the same one I told you about before, the one with the rough hand. She smeared something across his forehead, dark and oily. Wallace jerked back, spitting curses, but she only smiled. Then she looked at me. Yes, straight at me, and I felt her words inside my head, though her lips didn't move. You've brought him. You've done your part. Now maybe that's madness talking. Maybe guilt. Or maybe I really did deliver him to them. I don't know anymore. The circle tightened. Torches rose. Shadows bent across the trees, twisting into shapes that didn't belong. Some looked like animals, some like people, and some neither. Wallace screamed then. Not words, just raw fear. And that's when the singing began. Low at first, a single voice, then many, weaving over the drums. It wasn't beautiful, not in the way church hymns are. It was rough, guttural, but it carried something older than beauty, something you felt in your marrow. Wallace's struggles slowed. His chest heaved, his eyes darted, but his body sagged like the fight had been drained from him. The leader stepped forward, hand raised, and the chant cut off mid-note. Silence fell so heavy it rang in my ears. He spoke a word I can't repeat, Even thinking of it now makes my tongue feel heavy. Then he touched Wallace's chest with a carved bone staff. And this is where I lose people, where they stop believing me. Because when that staff pressed against him, the air shifted, the fire bent inward, and Wallace changed. Not his body, not exactly. More like the light around him twisted, folding in, until he didn't look like himself anymore. His outline blurred, like he was being swallowed by the night. He screamed again, but it wasn't fear this time. It was rage. It rattled my teeth. Then, he was gone. I don't mean they killed him, not in any way we'd understand. I mean gone. The ropes dropped empty. The circle stood in silence. And there I was, staring at the dirt where Wallace Troy had been seconds before. No body, no trace, nothing. Only the echo of drums, still beating inside my skull. Now, I've told you before, I might have just been watching, hidden. That's one version. But there's another I can't shake. In that version, I helped. I stepped into the circle. I held the torch. I gave him over to them, knowing full well what they'd do. And maybe that's why they let me leave. Because I did leave, didn't I? I'm here, telling you this. I walked back down that trail before dawn, my lantern shaking in my hand, Wallace's flask heavy in my pocket. I told myself it was proof that someone would need to know what happened. But I never gave it to the sheriff, never showed it to anyone. It's still with me. Sometimes I wonder if the flask is real at all. When folks asked about Wallace, I shrugged, said he must have skipped town, maybe caught by revenuers, maybe gunned down by rivals. Nobody pushed too hard. In these hills, people vanish all the time. But the clan, the forbidden ground, I never told, until now. And here's the thing that keeps me up most nights. I don't think Wallace died. Not exactly. I think he's still out there, part of them now. Taken into whatever they are, whatever they serve. Sometimes, when the wind's right, I hear drums in the distance, slow, heavy, calling. I tell myself it's just memory, just guilt. But some nights, I find myself halfway down the trail before I realize my boots are moving, like I'm being summoned back. Maybe that's what they wanted all along. Maybe I was never just a witness. Maybe I was the offering. And if that's true, then Wallace Troy didn't vanish alone. I did too. Story number 2. You ever get a voicemail from someone who's already dead? I know how that sounds, but listen. When I pressed play, it wasn't just their voice I heard. It was everything they never wanted me to know. And if I'm honest, no, I can't be honest. Not yet. Because if you knew the whole truth, you'd never believe a single word I'm about to say. You ever pick up your phone in the middle of the night and know, before even listening, that the message waiting for you should not exist? That's what happened to me. And I swear, before you roll your eyes, before you click away, this isn't a ghost story. At least, I don't think it is. The voicemail came at 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because my phone lit up on the nightstand, casting this sickly glow across my ceiling. I almost didn't check it. I almost turned it face down and went back to sleep. But something in me knew. I needed to hear it. It was from her. That's all I'll say for now. I'm not ready to tell you her name. You'll understand later why it's better that way. The thing is, she was already dead I don't mean figuratively dead, like cut out of my life or dead to me. I mean, we buried her. I stood there, dirt under my nails, when the casket went into the ground, and yet there her name was, glowing across my screen, attached to a voicemail that said it had been left just minutes before. I pressed play. The sound that poured through the speaker wasn't right. You know when a recording glitches, like someone dragging a fork across metal while whispering at the same time? That's what it sounded like. Her voice kept cutting in and out, like she was too close to the microphone, then too far away. At first, all I could make out were fragments, words that didn't connect. Don't. Listen. There. You. A gasp, then silence, then a thud, like something falling. I froze. My hands shook so hard the phone nearly slipped. The thing is, I shouldn't have been shocked, because this wasn't the first time I thought I'd heard from her. But let me not get ahead of myself. The voicemail played on, and in between the static, her voice grew sharper, clearer. It was like she was forcing her way through. "You can't. Hide it," she whispered. "I know what you did." That's when I dropped the phone. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. I know how insane it sounds. Dead people don't call at 2:17 in the morning. Dead people don't accuse you from beyond the grave. But then again, you didn't know her. You didn't know what she was capable of. I sat there in the dark, staring at the phone on the floor, waiting for it to light up again. Part of me wanted it to. Part of me missed her voice. I shouldn't admit that, but it's true. Even through the distortion, even with the venom in her tone, it still pulled at me the way it always had. We weren't just friends. I guess that's obvious by now. Though what we were isn't simple to explain. Sometimes lovers, sometimes enemies, always circling each other like moths to flame. I'd block her number, she'd show up at my door. She'd vanish for weeks, and I'd find myself driving past her house at night, headlights off, praying she wouldn't look out the window. Toxic, sure, but addictive. So when I heard her voice again, when I heard her call me out from the other side, I didn't feel just fear. I felt something else, something like pride. Because maybe it meant she couldn't let go of me either, not even in death. Still, I told myself it had to be a mistake, maybe a glitch, maybe someone splicing her old voicemails, some cruel joke. My mind spun with excuses, each one thinner than the last. And then the message ended, not with her voice, but with a sound I still can't explain. A laugh. Not hers, not mine, not anyone's. Just this low, guttural laugh that rattled inside my chest long after the line went dead. I replayed the voicemail 3 times. Each time, different words seemed to emerge from the static. Once I swore I heard her say my name. Once it sounded like she said, "Look behind you." And once I heard nothing at all. Just silence, stretched too long, heavy enough to press against my lungs. By the 3rd time, I couldn't stand to hear it again. I deleted it. At least, I thought I did. But every morning since, it's back. Same timestamp, same number, same warped voice spilling through the phone speaker, accusing, warning, pleading. Always slightly different, like it's rewriting itself when I'm not looking. I know what you're thinking. I'm making this up. Or maybe I'm losing it, hearing things because I can't deal with the guilt. And maybe you're right. Maybe I am broken. But here's the part you'll have to decide for yourself. Because I can't say it plainly. Not yet. She wasn't supposed to die that night. Not like that. The police ruled it an accident. Everyone nodded, whispered condolences, brought flowers, cried at the funeral. But I never told them what really happened before she left. What we said. What I did or didn't do. That's why the voicemail terrifies me more than any shadow, any so-called haunting. Because if she's really speaking to me now, if her words are real, then she knows the truth. And if it's not real, if it's just my mind, unraveling, then maybe the truth is worse. I haven't told anyone about this. Not the police, not her family, not even, well, I almost said his name, but I can't. He doesn't belong in this chapter. He'll come later. For now, it's just me and her and the messages that won't stop. Every night at 2:17, like clockwork. And last night, the message didn't come through my phone at all. It came from somewhere else. I'll show you where. You want to know where the last message came from. It wasn't the phone this time. It was the house. Her house. The one at the edge of town we swore we'd never step into again. I didn't drive there on purpose. At least that's what I tell myself. One minute I was sitting in my car, replaying the voicemail in my head. The next minute, headlights were cutting through the fog, and I was staring at the broken fence that sagged in front of her old place. The house looked even worse than I remembered. Windows, boarded up, paint peeling like dead skin, the roof bowing under years of neglect. And yet, the porch light was on. I swear it had been off for years. But that night it glowed this weak yellow, like someone had just flicked the switch, waiting for me. I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and mold, but beneath it was something sharper, something metallic. My shoes crunched against glass scattered across the floor, and for a second I thought I heard footsteps above me. I told myself it was just the house settling, but deep down I knew better. Every corner of that house carried echoes of our past. The cracked banister was where she once leaned, laughing too loudly at something I said. The wallpaper in the living room still bore the faint burn marks from the night we argued so violently I threw a candle against the wall. And the kitchen. God, the kitchen. I couldn't look too long at the sink, not without remembering her hands clutching the edge, knuckles white, eyes full of something between fury and fear. That's the thing about memory. It doesn't replay like a video. It mutates, bleeds into the present, confuses itself with guilt. As I moved through the house, moments began to overlap. 1 second I was alone. The next I could hear her voice, sharp as glass. You'll regret this. One day, you'll regret everything. I froze. The sound came from upstairs, and though I told myself it was impossible, my legs carried me up the staircase. Each step groaned like it was warning me to turn back, but I couldn't. Something pulled me, some need to hear her again, even if it wasn't real. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched longer than it should have. Doors. I didn't remember. Shadows where there should have been light. I picked the first door on the left and pushed it open. It was her room. The walls still wore her posters, curling at the edges. Her mirror was cracked straight down the middle, splitting my reflection into two uneven halves. And on the bed, God, help me, On the bed lay my phone. The same phone I had in my pocket. It buzzed once. Voicemail. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. My hand shook too badly. And that's when I heard another sound. One I knew wasn't her. Funny place to come back to, isn't it? I spun around. In the doorway stood someone I hadn't seen since the funeral. Her brother, or maybe just her closest friend. It blurs together now. He looked thinner, older, eyes ringed in red as if he hadn't slept in months. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. "I knew you'd end up here," he said. I wanted to answer, but my throat locked up. He stepped closer, boots crunching against the same glass I'd scattered downstairs. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "Not after what you did." The words hit like a hammer. But the strange thing was, I couldn't remember if he'd really said them, or if my guilt had shoved them into his mouth. His lips moved, yes, but the sound felt detached, echoing in a way real voices shouldn't. "What do you mean?" I managed, though my voice cracked. He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "Don't play dumb. You think she left that message for you? You think she's warning you? No, she's accusing you." I shook my head. "No, you don't understand," but he cut me off. "I understand perfectly. You were the last one with her. Everyone knows it. They just don't want to believe it. But I've seen the truth. She told me. She tells me every night." That was the moment I realized his eyes weren't on me at all. They were fixed past me, into the room, toward the bed where the second phone lay buzzing. I glanced back, and for half a second I swear I saw her sitting there. Not lying, not rotting, sitting, upright, watching me with that same look she wore the night we last spoke. The look that said she knew exactly how much of my soul was already hers. I blinked, and the vision was gone. The bed was empty again. When I turned back to the doorway, so was he. No sound of footsteps retreating, no creak of the staircase, just absence, thick and suffocating. I stumbled forward, grabbing the phone off the bed with trembling hands. The screen lit up, one new voicemail, timestamp 2:17 a.m. Only this time, the caller ID didn't show her name. It showed mine. I dropped it instantly. The device hit the floor, but the buzzing continued, louder and louder, filling the room until it felt like the walls would crack. Apart. I clapped my hands over my ears, but it seeped through, vibrating in my teeth, my skull, my bones, and then silence. I looked down. The phone was gone. I stumbled back, hitting the wall, breathing too hard. None of it made sense anymore. What was real? What was memory? What was guilt poisoning my mind? Maybe I'd imagined the brother. Maybe I'd imagined the entire house. Maybe I'd never left my car. But the silence didn't last. From somewhere, deep inside the house, muffled but unmistakable, her voice rose again. "You can't run forever. You can't bury this." And as much as I wanted to, as much as my body screamed at me to run, I knew she was right. Because if the house could speak now, then the final message was still waiting. You ever realize a message isn't meant to warn you, but to trap you? That's what I understood when I heard her voice echo through the house, thick with dust and silence. I should have run. Anyone sane would have sprinted down the stairs, kicked open the door and never looked back. But instead, I stood frozen, the sound of her words pinning me in place like nails through my skin. "You can't bury this," she whispered again, louder this time. Not from the phone, not from memory, from the walls themselves. I stumbled forward, each step heavier than the last. The floor groaned beneath me like it didn't want me walking there. My eyes darted from shadow to shadow, expecting her to step out any moment. And the worst part, a small part of me hoped she would, because then at least I'd know she was real. The house pulled me deeper. I don't even remember opening doors or climbing stairs again. I just remember being in the basement suddenly, damp air choking me, the smell of earth thick in my throat. And there, in the corner, was an old cassette player. It shouldn't have been there. I'd never seen it before in my life, but the little red light blinked like it had been waiting years just for me. I pressed play. The tape whirred, hissed, then her voice crackled through. Not distorted like the voicemails, clear, too clear. "You think it's about the accident," she said, her tone low and steady. But it wasn't an accident, was it? My stomach dropped. My hands went clammy, because no one else knew what happened that night. What really happened. The recording continued. "You told them you left, me alone. You told them we argued, and I stormed off. But that's not true, is it? You followed me. You grabbed my arm. You wouldn't let go. I begged you, but you didn't stop." I shook my head violently. "No, that's not how it happened. That's not..." But the voice cut me off, sharp as glass. "You pushed me. My knees buckled. The basement swayed. I clutched the wall, trying to breathe, trying to remember the truth, because that wasn't how I remembered it. I never pushed her. Did I? I remembered her slipping, yes. The rain, the mud, her hands clawing at my jacket as she lost her balance. But I didn't push. I didn't. The tape hissed again. Then her voice lowered, almost soft. "You let me fall." I pressed stop, slammed my fist against the cassette player until the plastic cracked, but the words kept echoing, not from the machine anymore, from inside my head. "You let me fall." I stumbled back, chest heaving, and that's when I saw him again, her brother, or friend, or whatever he was. He stood at the base of the stairs, eyes fixed on me, expression unreadable. "You hear it too?" I whispered. But he didn't answer. He just tilted his head, slowly, like a dog listening for something only it can hear, and then he smiled. "You finally admit it," he said. "I didn't push her," I shouted, the words bouncing off concrete walls. "It wasn't like that. You weren't there." He stepped closer, and I swear his shadow stretched longer than it should have, crawling up the walls, swallowing the light. "But she was there," he said softly. "And she's here now." The room went black. For a moment, I thought I'd passed out. But no, I could still hear the basement, the dripping pipes, the low hum of silence. Only now her voice layered over it, surrounding me from every corner. "I know what you did. You can't hide it. You let me fall, over and over, until it became a chorus. I covered my ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't in the air, it was inside me, like my own thoughts had been hijacked. Then, just as suddenly, silence. And in that silence, a single sound. My phone buzzing in my pocket. I yanked it out. New voicemail. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. My hands trembled so hard I almost dropped it. I pressed play, and this time, it wasn't her voice, it was mine. "You can't run forever," my voice said. calm, cold. You can't bury this, because I already told them everything. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Told who? I whispered to the phone, as if it could answer. And then the message ended with a sound I'll never forget. A knock. 3 sharp knocks, echoing not from the phone, but from the door at the top of the basement stairs. I looked up. The door creaked open. Light spilled down, blinding me, and for a moment I saw a figure silhouetted there. I thought it was her. Come, back for me. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was worse. It was me, standing there, smiling. The door slammed shut, plunging me into darkness. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the floor. I backed into the corner, shaking, whispering to myself that it wasn't real. None of this was real. But the truth is, I don't know anymore. I don't know if she's haunting me, or if my mind finally split open under the weight of guilt. I don't know if her brother ever really came to the house, or if I invented him to carry some of the blame I can't admit. All I know is this: the messages don't stop. Every night, 2:17 a.m., a new one. Sometimes her voice, sometimes mine, sometimes both, each one pulling me further apart. And now, I've left you one too. Check your phone. If there's a voicemail waiting, don't listen. Delete it. Please. Delete it. Because once you hear it, it never stops. Story number 3. I know what you're thinking. Elevators don't just make stops that aren't on the panel. And you're right, they don't. Unless you count the night I pressed 5 and ended up somewhere between my own memories. And a locked basement that doesn't exist. At least that's what I told the police. If I told you the elevator in my building had a button that doesn't exist, you'd think I was lying. But that's the problem. I thought I was lying too until the night I pressed it. And I swear to you, it took me somewhere that isn't supposed to be real. That's how it started. Or maybe that's just the version I've been rehearsing for myself. You'll forgive me if I get things mixed up. Memory is a slippery thing, especially when the walls of this place seem to shift every time I close my eyes. I've lived in this building for 3 years. It's one of those forgotten apartment blocks squeezed between the nicer parts of the city. The kind of place nobody chooses. You just end up here. Rusted mailboxes, buzzers that don't work, and the elevator. God, the elevator. It groans every time it moves, like it's dragging more than just passengers between floors. Some nights, when the cables whine, I can't tell if it's the sound of machinery or the building itself breathing. I don't have many neighbors, not the kind who talk anyway. Most people pass by quickly, eyes lowered. But there's one woman I used to see often, a neighbor who lived on the 5th floor. She always smiled at me in the hallway, even when I avoided her eyes. I didn't know her name back then. I wish I'd asked. Now she's, well, you'll see. It was late, maybe past midnight, when I found myself in the elevator that first night. I remember the lights flickering. Half the bulbs burned out long ago, so you only get these fractured flashes of yourself in the steel walls. I pressed the button for my floor. At least, I thought I did. But when I looked closer, my finger was resting on something else. A button with no number. Just a blank, worn circle of brass, as if someone had rubbed away whatever label used to be there. Now here's the part I can't explain. I'd never seen that button before, and I've taken that elevator every day. You'd think I'd have noticed it. But somehow, that night, it was just there, waiting. The doors shut, the motor groaned, and I swear the elevator moved in the wrong direction. It felt slower, like sinking, not climbing. I tried to laugh it off, tell myself it was nothing. But when the doors opened, the hallway outside wasn't the one I knew. It looked similar at first. Same cracked tiles, same yellow paint peeling from the walls. But everything was off, too quiet. The lights above hummed faintly, though I don't recall hearing electricity in this building before. And the air, it smelled sharp, like cleaning chemicals, mixed with something metallic, something that made my stomach twist. There were doors along the hallway, but they didn't match the numbers on any floor I'd seen. No 401, no 502, just plain doors. Some had names scratched into them, handwriting I didn't recognize. I stepped out, and the doors shut behind me before I could think. I know what you're wondering. Why didn't I turn back, press the button, leave? But I couldn't. My body moved like it wasn't mine, like something in that hallway wanted me to keep walking. Halfway down, I thought I saw movement. A figure, shadow stretched across the wall, thin and long, like it didn't belong to anyone. My first thought was, it's just my reflection. But when I stopped, the shadow didn't. It kept moving, sliding further down until it disappeared into one of the doorways. I don't know how long I stood there. My hands were shaking, nails digging into my palms. And then, mercifully, the elevator doors opened again behind me. Just a sound, a soft mechanical sigh, as if the machine had decided to forgive me. I didn't hesitate. I ran back in, slammed the button for my own floor, and prayed. The ride back felt endless, and yet when the doors opened, everything was normal again. Hallways with the right numbers, the faint stink of mildew I'd grown used to. Nothing out of place. For a while, I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Maybe I'd fallen asleep in the elevator. Maybe it was just a dream. That's easier, isn't it? To call it a dream. But here's where things get worse. A few nights later, I wasn't alone. I stepped into the elevator with her, my neighbor from the 5th floor. She gave me that same kind smile. I remember her perfume, faint, like jasmine. She pressed the button for her floor. I pressed mine, and then, without thinking, I pressed it. The blank button. I don't know why. I don't remember deciding. My finger just drifted there, like it belonged. The elevator groaned, lights flickered, and the air grew heavier. My neighbor laughed nervously, said something about this building falling apart. But when the doors opened, she went silent. We were there again, the hallway, the impossible one. She looked at me, confused. "This isn't my floor," she whispered. I tried to smile, to calm her, but my mouth wouldn't move right. She stepped out first. I should have stopped her. I know that now, but I just stood there, frozen, watching her figure dissolve into the shadows. The elevator doors closed before I followed. Or maybe I didn't follow at all. That's the detail I can never hold on to. Sometimes I remember stepping into that hallway after her. Sometimes I remember the doors shutting in my face. What I do know is that when I reached the 5th floor again, she wasn't there. Her apartment door was shut, too quiet. I waited, listening. Nothing. The next morning, there was no sign of her. Mail piled up outside her box. No footsteps in the hall. People said she must have left suddenly, but I don't remember hearing any moving trucks, any arguments, any goodbyes. She was just gone. And yet, this is important. I still smell her perfume sometimes, faint, drifting through the elevator when no one else is there. Jasmine, sweet, wrong. I told myself not to press the button again, not to look for that hallway, but it's hard to stop when something calls to you. Harder still when you realize the elevator remembers, and that's how the trouble began. I didn't kill her. I need you to understand that. People keep twisting my words, saying I admitted something I never said. But if she never came back from that place, how is that my fault? I didn't build the elevator. That's what I told the detectives, over and over. But their faces never changed. You know that blank look cops give you? Like they've already decided what happened and they're just waiting for you to confess. Yeah, that's the look I got. They asked me when I'd last seen her. I said, in the elevator. They asked where she went. I said, to a floor that doesn't exist. That's when the room went quiet. Not because they believed me, but because they didn't know how to write that into their little notebooks without smirking. One of them, the younger one, leaned forward and whispered, "You think that's funny?" His breath smelled like burnt coffee. I told him I wasn't laughing, but here's the part that bothers me. Sometimes, when I replay the moment in my head, I see myself laughing, not because anything was funny, but because my nerves crack in strange ways. I can't swear to you I didn't smile. And maybe that's why they don't believe me. The building manager was worse. He's lived here longer than anyone, shuffling around with his keys jangling like shackles. When I told him about the blank button, his eyes narrowed, not with surprise, no, more like recognition, like he knew exactly what I was talking about. But he shook his head anyway, muttering, "No such thing. Elevator's been the same for years." "Then explain it," I snapped. "Explain how I pressed something that isn't there and ended up in a hallway that shouldn't exist." He didn't look at me when he said, "You ought to get some rest." Rest. As if sleep is possible in this place. The thing is, I've been back. Not intentionally. Or maybe that's a lie. I don't know anymore. Sometimes I catch myself in front of the panel, staring at that smooth brass circle, feeling my finger itch. I tell myself not to touch it, not again. But then the doors close, the lights flicker, and my hand drifts like it has its own will. And when I go there, when the doors slide open, it's never the same hallway. One night, the smell hit me first, sharp, chemical, like bleach. It clawed the back of my throat. The tiles were damp, slick under my shoes, as if someone had just finished scrubbing away a mess. And the names on the doors, they were different this time. Scratched letters, uneven, as though carved by desperate hands. Some of them I recognized, people I hadn't thought about in years. My old teacher, my sister's name, even mine. I swear to you I saw my own name etched into one of the doors. And it wasn't neat lettering. It was jagged, frantic, like whoever wrote it didn't want me to open it. I didn't, not that night. But I heard voices, muffled behind those doors. Some sounded like whispers, others like crying. One of them, I'll never forget, sounded like her, my neighbor. Soft, trembling, repeating, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." Do you know what it's like? Hearing someone beg from behind a wall, your mind splits. Half of you wants to rip it open, the other half knows. If you do, you won't like what you find. When I told the police about the voices, they laughed. They actually laughed. "Maybe lay off the late-night horror movies," one said. I almost lost it right there, because I know what I heard. Here's the contradiction, though, the part I can't get straight. Sometimes I remember her stepping out into that hallway. Other times, I remember the doors shutting before she had the chance. Two versions of the same night, both equally sharp in my mind. Which one's true? I can't tell anymore. Going, but it doesn't promise you'll come back. The detectives pressed me on details. What was she wearing? Did she say anything? Did you follow her? I kept telling them the same thing. She disappeared. The elevator took her. They didn't write that part down. I think the manager told them I was unstable. I overheard him one evening outside my door, his low voice carrying through the paper-thin walls. Words like imagination, obsessed, and worse, dangerous. Dangerous. Funny thing is, I never felt dangerous until he said it out loud. And yet, every time I come back from that hallway, my clothes smell faintly of bleach. My shoes leave faint streaks on the lobby floor, like I've been walking through something wet. But when I check the elevator, it's spotless. No trace, no proof. Maybe that's why I started taking notes, writing down everything, times, dates, sensations. I thought it would keep me sane, anchor me to something real. But when I look at the pages now, half of them don't make sense. Scribbles, sentences that start and don't finish. Whole paragraphs in handwriting that doesn't even look like mine. And the names. God, the names keep showing up. The same ones I saw carved on those doors. Sometimes written in my notebook before I even step into the elevator. I showed one page to the younger detective, desperate for him to believe me. His face went pale, but he handed it back quickly, saying, "This isn't evidence." "Then what is it?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Do you see the trap? If I insist too hard, I sound insane. If I stay quiet, I look guilty. Either way, I lose. The manager won't meet my eyes anymore. The detectives come around less often, but when they do, their questions feel sharper. They circle me like vultures, and through it all, the elevator waits, because that's the part I can't stop thinking about. The elevator wants me to press the button. I can feel it, humming under my skin every time I ride. Like it remembers me, remembers her. I didn't kill her. I need you to believe that. But if she's not alive, then where is she? That's the question that keeps me awake at night. That's the question the elevator whispers every time the doors creak open onto that impossible hallway. And the last time I went there, I swear, I heard something new, my own voice, calling from behind one of the doors. And that's when I realized the worst part. The elevator isn't just taking me places that don't exist. It's showing me where I'll end up. You think I don't know what you're whispering about me? That I'm a liar, a killer, a lunatic. But here's the thing. You're right about one of those. I just don't know which. That's how I started the last time anyone asked me directly what happened. The detectives wanted a confession. The manager wanted silence. And I wanted clarity. But clarity doesn't exist here. Not in this building. Not in that elevator. The smell of bleach has followed me everywhere. It clings to my hands no matter how much I scrub. At first, I thought it was the building staff, cleaning late at night. But then I remembered, we don't have staff. Just the manager. And I've never seen him with a mop, not once. I'm telling you, it's coming from the hallway, the one that shouldn't exist. The last time I pressed the button, it wasn't me. My finger moved before my brain caught up. Like I said before, it's not a choice anymore. The elevator chooses for me. The hum in the walls, the shudder of the cables, it all builds until my body gives in. And then, like clockwork, the doors open. This time, though, the hallway wasn't empty. There were stains on the floor, long, dark streaks that had seeped into the cracks of the tiles. At first, I thought water, then rust, then... No, it smelled too sharp, too familiar. The doors behind me tried to close, but I stuck my foot between them, half praying they'd stay open, half terrified they would. That's when I heard it, her voice again, my neighbour. Only this time she wasn't whispering. She was screaming. Why didn't you stop me? I froze. It was coming from behind one of the doors, a door with no number, no lock, nothing but my reflection warped in its dull metal surface. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself it was just my imagination. But the voice kept repeating, louder each time. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you stop me? My throat tightened. I said, I swear I said, I tried. But even as the words left me, I knew they were empty, because the truth is murkier than that. Sometimes I remember holding out my hand to her. Sometimes I remember pulling it back. Which one happened? Maybe both. Maybe neither. The manager's voice cut through my memory later when I confronted him. There is no missing tenant, he said, his eyes sharp. You're making trouble where there isn't any. Then who lived in 5B? I snapped. He blinked, slow. There is no 5B. That's when I started laughing. A sharp, broken sound. Because I've walked past that door 100 times. I've heard music from inside, smelled cooking through the cracks. But now, when I went back to check, the door wasn't there. Just a blank stretch of wall, smooth as if it had never existed. So you tell me, who's lying? Him or me? The detectives circled again after that, more persistent. Where were you the night she disappeared? With her, I said. Where exactly? And here's where I lose them every time. Between floors. They don't like that answer, but how else can I explain it? The elevator doesn't take me up or down. It takes me sideways into some seam of the building that was never built but has always been there. A memory lodged in the concrete, a wound that never healed. And each time I go, it gets worse. The last time, I swear I saw something waiting for me. Not her, not exactly. It was shaped like her, yes, but taller, thinner, its shadow bending wrong against the walls. It stood at the far end of the hallway, head tilted, arms limp. I couldn't see its face. But when it moved, the lights buzzed out, plunging everything into darkness. I stumbled back into the elevator, but the doors didn't close. They never close fast enough. I screamed. At myself, at the building, at her, and then the voice came again. Not hers. Mine. You brought me here. I don't remember pressing the button to escape. I don't remember the ride back. But when the doors opened, I was home, my clothes damp, streaked with something I don't want to name. I tried to burn them, thought it would make me clean again, but the smell, bleach and something coppery, still lingers on my skin. Here's what I can't shake. Every time I return from that place, something in the real world is different. Small things at first, mailboxes with different names, neighbors who don't recognize me. Then bigger things, doors missing, rooms rearranged. I feel like the building is rewriting itself, brick by brick, every time I step between floors. And maybe that's what it wants, to erase me, to fold me into its memory like it did with her. I tried to tell the detectives again. One of them sighed, pinched the bridge of his nose and muttered, "If you know something, just say it. Where's the body?" I wanted to laugh or cry, because the truth is, I don't know. There might not even be one. Or maybe I've been walking past it every day, hidden in plain sight. But listen to me carefully. If there is a body, it isn't mine. That's the only truth I can cling to. Still, every night the elevator hums. I feel it calling through the floorboards, a low vibration that rattles in my bones. I know it won't stop until I press that button again, and maybe next time I won't come back. Maybe that's what the building wants, to take me where it took her, to add my name to the doors. The floor remembers, you see. It remembers everything. The footsteps, the screams, the stains that won't wash out no matter how much bleach you pour. And maybe it remembers me most of all. So, if you don't hear from me again, if I vanish the way she did, you'll know why. The elevator never lies about where it's G. Story number 4. You ever see yourself blink when you didn't? I don't mean in a mirror. I mean, your reflection blinked first. I know that sounds insane, but I'm telling you, what happened wasn't just a trick of the light, and I should have listened to her, because she tried to warn me. She always tried to warn me. You ever notice your reflection breathing when you're not? I don't mean that thing where the mirror fogs up when you exhale. I mean her chest rising and falling when I wasn't moving at all. That's how I knew something was wrong. Or maybe that's when I started convincing myself it was. Either way, I can't stop replaying that moment because I should have trusted her from the beginning. She tried to warn me. I wasn't always like this. I used to be normal, or at least I thought I was. I used to wake up, brush my teeth, and barely even glance at my reflection before rushing out the door. But then I started noticing delays, little lags. Like when you're on a video call and the audio doesn't quite match the lips. I'd smile, and she'd smile a fraction of a second too late. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Everyone zones out, right? Maybe I was just tired. But that night, the night of the first blink, that was different. It was just after midnight. My apartment was silent, except for the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen and the occasional creak of old pipes shifting in the walls. I couldn't sleep, so I padded into the bathroom to wash my face. The light above the mirror flickered as usual, buzzing faintly like an irritated insect. I hated that light, but I never replaced it. Maybe I liked the way it made me look. Sickly, washed out, not quite real. I bent over the sink, splashed cold water on my face and looked up. And she blinked. Not a normal blink, Not the kind where your own eyes reflexively close and you see the same motion in the glass. No, this was hers. My eyes were wide open, stinging from the water, but she blinked. Slow, deliberate, like she was trying to tell me something. My stomach dropped, and I stumbled back against the door frame. I froze there, heart pounding in my throat, staring at her. She stared back, calm as ever, and that's when I saw it. Her chest rising and falling, just slightly out of sync with my own breath. I slammed off the light. The darkness swallowed me, and I stood there in silence, shaking. My breath echoed, too loud in the small bathroom, and I swear I could hear hers, softer, shallower, like a second presence in the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The next morning, I convinced myself it hadn't happened. Hallucinations are normal when you're exhausted, right? Everyone has moments where their brain misfires. But the memory lingered, sticking to the edges of my mind like wet paint. I tried avoiding the mirror altogether, brushing my teeth while staring at the tiles, shaving by touch. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but every time I caught a glimpse of her in my peripheral vision, my skin crawled. She was watching me, not just reflecting me, watching. I should probably mention something about my past. You're probably wondering if I've always been paranoid. If maybe I'm just another guy losing his mind in a tiny apartment with peeling wallpaper and neighbors who scream through the walls. And maybe that's true. But if you'd been through what I have, maybe you'd understand. My mother used to cover mirrors when I was a kid. She said they invited things in. I thought she was superstitious, maybe even crazy, but I remember the way her hands shook as she pinned old bed sheets over the glass. She died when I was 16. I smashed every mirror in the house after her funeral, but I never told anyone. That part. My father wasn't around much, not in any way that mattered. He'd come home drunk, screaming at her, sometimes at me, though I learned quickly not to make eye contact when he was like that. He hated mirrors too. He'd mutter under his breath, "They're liars," whenever he walked past one. Maybe that's where this started, or maybe the mirror really did blink first. Days passed, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I'd walk by the hallway mirror and feel my neck prickle like someone was breathing against the back of it. I'd catch her smiling when I wasn't, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth, gone before I could be sure. I told myself to get rid of the mirrors, but something in me refused. I couldn't throw them out. I couldn't even drape them. It was like she'd be angry if I hid her. Like she wanted to be seen. So I watched her. At night, I'd sit cross-legged on the bathroom floor, the door locked, the mirror lit by that buzzing bulb. I'd stare at her, daring her to move again. Hours would pass, and she wouldn't do anything. She'd just look back at me, expressionless. Sometimes I'd think I saw her breathing, but that could have been me projecting, until the second time was 3 nights later. I was half asleep, leaning against the wall, my legs numb from sitting too long. The apartment was dead silent. My eyelids drooped, and I almost nodded off when I heard it. A soft tap. My eyes snapped open. She was staring at me, her face closer to the glass than mine was. I hadn't moved, but she had leaned in, and her hand, my hand, was pressed against the other side of the mirror. Another tap. I gasped and scrambled backward, hitting the wall. She didn't flinch. She just watched me. And then, slowly, she moved her lips. I couldn't hear her. Not really, but I could read them. I could almost Read them. I shook my head, whispering, no, 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 no. She mouthed it again, a single word. I refused to say what it was, not out loud, not here. All I know is that when she said it, I felt my skin crawl like ants were under it. I backed out of the bathroom, heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. I slammed the door, grabbed a blanket and threw it over the mirror. I should have felt relief, but I didn't, because I swear I heard a laugh from behind the glass. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time since moving in. I left the bathroom dark, the mirror covered, but I couldn't stop picturing her face. That tiny smirk, that whisper I couldn't get out of my head. I curled up in bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, and tried to convince myself it was all in my head. Maybe it was, but deep down, I knew better. She wasn't just a reflection. She wasn't me. And for the first time, I started wondering if maybe she'd been watching me for longer than I'd realized. Long before that first blink. You can cover a mirror, but you can't stop your reflection from watching you. I learned that the hard way. That night, the night she mouthed that word I'll never repeat. I thought I'd stopped her. I draped that blanket over the mirror, like it was a coffin lid. I locked the bathroom door and tried to pretend nothing had happened. But the thing about paranoia is, once it settles in, it spreads. By the next morning, I saw her everywhere. At first, it was just the bathroom mirror, but soon I started catching glimpses in places I hadn't even thought about. The black screen of my phone when it dimmed, the reflection in the stainless steel of the toaster, the faint ghostly shape in the bus window as I rode downtown. I'd glance away, look back, and for a split second, her smile wouldn't match mine, or her eyes would be closed when mine were wide open. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, but something about her presence felt heavy, like she was pressing against the other side of every reflective surface, waiting for me to look. Stopped leaving my apartment. I taped sheets and towels over the windows, flipped picture frames face down, and unplugged my TV because I couldn't stand catching her face in the black reflection of the screen. The place looked like a crime scene, everything covered, every corner dark. Still, she found me. I knew I had to tell someone. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. So I called Claire. She didn't pick up the first 3 times, and when she finally answered, her voice was sharp, irritated. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "It's important," I whispered, glancing at the covered mirror in the hallway. The blanket twitched in the draft, and I flinched. "Please. I think I'm losing it." There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. "Where are you?" She came over an hour later. Claire always smelled faintly of cigarettes and lavender lotion, a combination I'd never liked but found comforting in that moment. She stepped into my apartment, her nose wrinkling at the stale air. "What the hell happened here?" she muttered, staring at the sheets covering the windows and mirrors. I stood there in the dim living room, hands trembling. I had to cover them. She watches me. "Who watches you?" she said, her voice tight with concern. "My reflection." Claire stared at me. I could see it in her eyes, that flicker of pity mixed with fear. The look people give you when they're trying to decide if you're dangerous or just broken. "Okay," she said carefully. You've been alone too long. You're scaring yourself. Maybe it's time you saw someone. I'm not crazy. My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. She blinked first, Claire. She smiled when I wasn't smiling. She moved. Claire took a slow breath. Look, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but you sound off. You haven't been sleeping, have you? I can't sleep, I whispered. She talks to me. Claire put a hand on my arm, and I flinched. She pulled back like I'd burned her. You're scaring me, she said softly. I wanted to tell her everything, that I'd heard laughter behind the mirror, that I could feel her breathing when I stood near it. But the words felt heavy, dangerous, like saying them out loud would make them real. Please, I said instead, just stay tonight, please. Claire hesitated, then shook her head. I can't. I have to work early, but you need help. I'll call someone, okay? I grabbed her wrist. Don't. Please, don't call anyone. She looked at me like I was a stranger. When she left, the apartment felt colder, quieter. I sat in the dark for hours, rocking slightly, staring at the bathroom door. I didn't want to sleep, but exhaustion dragged me under. I woke up to the sound of fabric rustling. My heart pounded as I sat up, every nerve on fire. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and crept toward the hallway. The air felt thick, like I was walking through water. The sound came again, a soft, dragging whisper, like a blanket being pulled across the floor. When I reached the bathroom, I froze. The blanket I'd taped over the mirror was gone. The mirror was bare. And she was there. She didn't move when I stepped into the doorway. She just stood on her side of the glass, her face pale and smiling, her hand pressed flat against the surface. My hand shook as I raised it, and for a moment, I almost pressed it against hers. But then I saw it, her lips twitching. She mouthed the same word as before. No, I whispered, backing away. No, no, no. Her smile widened. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed a hammer and rushed back. My pulse thundered in my ears. I raised the hammer and swung. The mirror didn't shatter. The glass rippled, like water. I stumbled back, dropping the hammer. My chest heaved as I watched her press her face closer to the glass, her breath fogging up the surface from the inside, and then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. I slapped my hands over my ears, but the knocking only grew louder, faster. It wasn't coming from the mirror anymore. It was coming from everywhere. From the darkened window, the black TV screen, the polished kettle on the stove. She was in all of them. I stumbled back into my bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved a chair under the knob. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, Claire's name flashing on the screen. My hands trembled as I answered. Hello? There was no sound at first, just breathing. Claire, a faint whisper came through the line, soft and distorted. Let me in. I froze. The voice wasn't Claire's. I dropped the phone. The knocking started again, this time on my bedroom mirror, the one I'd forgotten to cover. I turned slowly, the flashlight trembling in my grip. She stood there, smiling wider than I thought was possible, her lips pressed to the glass. Her hands slapped softly, rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. My knees gave out and I slid to the floor. She mouthed another word, slow and deliberate. Don't know what terrified me more, the fact that I understood it, or the fact that it was my name. The glass bulged inward, just slightly, like something pressing against a balloon. I scrambled backward, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. "Stay away from me!" I screamed. She tilted her head, the smile never fading, and tapped one last time. This time, the sound didn't come from the mirror. It came from right behind me. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I turned back, she was gone. The mirror reflected only me, wide-eyed, pale, trembling. But I knew she was still there. I could hear her breathing. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, flashlight on, staring at the mirror. I knew she wouldn't stay quiet for long. She wanted out, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep her in. The next part of this story is where everything started to break, literally. The first sound wasn't the glass shattering. It was her laugh. It was soft, almost melodic, like wind chimes in a storm. But it froze my blood. I hadn't slept in 2 days, sitting there in the dark, flashlight dying in my trembling hand. My bedroom was a prison, every reflective surface either smashed or hidden under blankets. I thought if I could just hold out long enough, she'd get bored. But she didn't. She never blinked. I don't even know what time it was when it happened. When she decided she was done waiting. The knock came first, sharp and deliberate, rattling through the frame of the mirror like a heartbeat. Tap, tap, tap. I clutched the hammer, though I'd learned it couldn't hurt her. "Stay there," I whispered, voice hoarse. "Stay in your place." But she just smiled. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate, like she was testing me. Her palm pressed flat against the glass, leaving a faint, foggy print. My breath caught in my throat when I noticed the outline of her hand. It wasn't mine. Her fingers were longer, thinner, the nails too sharp, like shards of porcelain. "I'm not crazy," I said aloud, trying to convince myself. "You're real. I know you're real." She tilted her head, mirroring me, but not perfectly, a fraction of a second off, just enough to make my stomach turn. Her lips moved, shaping silent words I refused to acknowledge, and then, in one slow motion, she raised her other hand and knocked again. Tap, tap. Cracks spiderwebbed across the mirror. Scrambled backward, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. "No, no, no," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "Stay there. You stay there." But the cracks spread like veins of ice across a frozen lake, each one pulsing with a faint silvery glow. The glass didn't shatter. It rippled like liquid as she pressed her palm harder. "Don't do this," I begged. "Please." She stopped knocking. She just stood there, smiling that impossible smile, and mouthed my name. Slowly, and then, with a sickening crack, the surface bulged inward. I screamed and swung the hammer at the mirror, but it passed through like water. My arm plunged into icy coldness, the sensation so shocking I dropped the hammer. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingers were freezing, impossibly strong, pulling me closer to the glass. "No!" I shrieked, digging my heels into the floor. "Let go!" She leaned forward, her face pressing against the glass until it distorted, stretching unnaturally. I yanked my arm free and fell back, gasping. The mirror rippled violently, then stilled. She was gone. I sat frozen, every muscle locked, barely breathing. The mirror reflected only me, pale and shaking. hair plastered to my forehead with sweat. Then, slowly, the reflection blinked. My stomach dropped. I hadn't blinked. She stood perfectly still, staring at me, her smile gone. Her expression was blank, unreadable. My reflection raised its hand. I didn't. She waved. I scrambled backward, tripping over the chair, slamming into the wall. "No," I whispered. "No, this isn't happening." But she stepped forward, and the surface of the mirror rippled again. The glass burst outward with a deafening crack. Shards rained down like ice, but none of them cut me. She stepped through, barefoot, her pale skin glistening like porcelain, her hair hanging wet around her face, her smile returned too wide, too sharp. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. She crouched in front of me, tilting her head, studying me like a specimen. Her eyes were wrong, too bright, too clear, like polished glass. "You wanted me out," she whispered. Her voice wasn't mine. It was softer, deeper, like the sound of wind through broken windows. "I didn't," I choked out. "I didn't." She smiled wider. "You called me. You watched me. You fed me." My body shook. "Stay away from me." She leaned closer until her cold breath brushed my face. "You've been so lonely," she murmured, "so scared. Let me help." I tried to scream, but no sound came out as she pressed her hand against my chest. The cold seeped through my shirt, into my bones. My limbs went numb. I couldn't move, couldn't fight. She leaned in closer, her face inches from mine. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll take care of everything." And then she pushed. It was like falling into ice water. My vision shattered, fragments of light and darkness swirling around me. I clawed at the surface, but my hands slipped on smooth, cold glass. I screamed, but the sound was muffled, like I was underwater. And then I realized I was on the other side. She stood where I'd been, staring at me through the mirror. I pounded on the glass, my breath fogging it from inside. She smiled, tilting her head just like I used to. "No!" I screamed, but no sound escaped. She raised her hand and pressed it to the glass, mimicking me perfectly now. Then she winked. Watched helplessly as she turned, stepping over the broken shards of glass like they weren't even there. She moved through my apartment with perfect confidence, slipping into my clothes, picking up my phone. The screen lit up. Claire's name flashed. "Hey," she said into the phone, her voice a perfect imitation of mine. "Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry, about earlier. I wasn't feeling well, but I'm better now. Come over, okay?" Tears stung my eyes. I slammed my fists against the mirror, but she didn't look back. I don't know how long I screamed, how long I begged, but time feels different. Here, slower. The glass is no longer broken from this side. It's whole again. A perfect, gleaming surface. She walks around my apartment, living my life, while I'm trapped in this cold, silent place. Sometimes she comes close, pressing her face to the glass, smiling at me. She mouths words I can't hear. Sometimes she knocks. Sometimes she just stands there, waiting. I've stopped sleeping. I don't know if I even can. The darkness behind me stretches forever, but I don't dare look away from the glass. Because if I do, I think she might disappear entirely, and I'll be left here alone. Claire came over. I watched from the other side as she hugged her, laughing, completely fooled. My double looked so normal, so me. Claire never even glanced at the mirror. She doesn't know I'm here. Nobody does. It's been days, I think. Maybe weeks. The glass feels thinner now. Sometimes I see shapes moving in the darkness behind me, other reflections drifting in the void. I don't want to know what they are. She visits me every night. She kneels in front of the mirror, strokes the glass with her pale fingers, and whispers things I can almost hear. I think she's telling me to let go, but I can't. If I let go, I'll disappear. I'm telling you this because I don't know how much longer I can hold on. If you're watching this, if you're seeing me in this mirror, please listen to me. That's not me out there. And if she smiles at you first, run. Story number. You won't believe me when I tell you this, but I didn't break any rules that night. Not one. And yet, he's still coming for me. I saw him, standing outside my window, smiling, like he already knew I'd be next. The thing is, I never told anyone what I really did that night, not even the police. You know what's funny? I used to think I was careful enough to follow every rule, careful enough to keep my head down and survive. But rules don't save you, not when he has already chosen you. That's what nobody tells you. The Nightmare Man doesn't just hunt rule breakers. He hunts the ones who think they're safe. I should start at the beginning though, right? That's what people like you want, the full story, so fine. Here it is. It was last winter. Snow blanketed the highway, and I had just started a temporary night security job at a rundown motel on the edge of town. The kind of place you'd drive by 100 times without noticing, its sign flickering half dead over an empty parking lot. I needed the money, so I didn't ask questions. Frank, the owner, was a man with too much weight in his shoulders and not enough sleep in his eyes. He hired me in less than 5 minutes, muttered something about keeping watch, and handed me a ring of keys. He never once smiled. Before he left, he pointed to a laminated sheet pinned to the wall of the break room. "These," he said, tapping the paper with a shaky finger, "are the rules. Read them, follow them, no exceptions." I skimmed the list and nearly laughed. It read more like a creepypasta than a safety guide. Rules like Rule number 1, don't look at him. Rule number 4, if the phone rings after 2:13 a.m., do not answer. Rule number 5, keep the curtains in room 6 closed at all times. There were others, but Frank didn't wait for me to finish. He just said, "Lock up at dawn," and walked out, his taillights vanishing into the snow. At first, I thought the rules were some sort of hazing ritual, a joke to freak out the new hire. The motel was practically abandoned. Half the rooms had out-of-service signs, and the lobby smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke. My job was simple: sit at the front desk, watch the security monitors, and keep the place from burning down. Easy money, I thought. The first few hours passed quietly. A truck rumbled by on the highway, but no guests came in. The snow fell heavier, coating the windows in white. I spent most of my shift scrolling through my phone, glancing at the flickering monitors every few minutes. There were 8 screens, one for the parking lot, one for the lobby, and the rest for the hallway cameras. Around midnight, I started noticing glitches. The camera feed for the far hallway would freeze for a second, then flicker back on. Static lines crawled across the screen, distorting the view. I blamed the storm. But then something changed. At 12:47 a.m., the hallway camera froze again. Only this time, there was something in the frame. A figure. It stood at the end of the hallway, just a silhouette in the grainy feed. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen, trying to make out details. Was it a guest? Frank hadn't mentioned anyone checking in. The figure didn't move. I grabbed the desk phone and dialed Frank's number, but it went straight to voicemail. I considered going to check the hallway myself, but hesitated. My eyes drifted back to the laminated sheet on the wall. Rule number 1, don't look at him. I shook my head. Ridiculous. I told myself it was probably a glitch, maybe a shadow caused by a flickering light. Still, I couldn't shake the unease creeping up my spine. I switched to another camera feed. Lobby. Empty. Parking lot. No cars. Hallway. Still frozen. Still showing that figure at the end. A sharp crack echoed through the motel like ice splitting. I jumped in my chair, heart pounding, scanning the monitors for movement. That's when the figure was suddenly closer. Not walking. Not moving, just closer. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, thinking I was imagining things. But no, he was now halfway. Down the hallway, his shape clearer in the static. A tall man in a long coat, no face, just darkness where his features should have been. The rules echoed in my mind. Don't look at him. I didn't understand what that meant. Wasn't I already looking? My pulse quickened, and a strange pressure filled the room, like the air was thicker, heavier. I switched the feed again. The lobby camera flickered. For a second, I saw movement by the front door. A shadow. I stood slowly, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But leave where? The snow outside was knee-deep, and the nearest gas station was 10 miles away. My job was to stay, and Frank had been very clear about following the rules. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer, my hand trembling as I shined it around the lobby. Nothing. The shadow I thought I'd seen wasn't there, but when I looked, back at the monitors, my stomach dropped. The figure was gone from the hallway feed. I switched through every camera, panic clawing at me. Parking lot, empty. Lobby, nothing. Hallway, nothing. I exhaled shakily and leaned back in my chair, trying to calm down. That's when the front door creaked. I whipped around, flashlight beam cutting through the dim lobby. The door was still locked, snow piling up against the glass. But there was a shadow stretching across the floor. Long, thin. I turned back to the monitors. There he was, standing in the lobby, right behind me. I froze. The flashlight shook in my hands, but I couldn't make myself turn around. I could feel him though, the weight of his presence. The air smelled like wet soil and iron, like something freshly dug from a grave. The rules screamed in my head, don't look at him, don't look at him, so I didn't. I sat there, staring at the monitors, at the grainy feed of him standing inches behind me. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just watched. Minutes, dragged by like hours. My eyes burned, terrified of blinking. Eventually, I noticed something strange. The camera feed flickered every few seconds, and each time it did, he seemed closer, closer, closer. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. The flashlight rolled off the desk and clattered to the floor, but I didn't dare move. The monitor flickered again, and this time he wasn't there. The air shifted, lighter somehow, but I didn't relax. I stayed frozen, muscles locked, until I heard a sound from the hallway. A voice, a whisper. Answer the phone. The desk phone rang, sharp and shrill, cutting through the silence. The ringing didn't stop. It wasn't the polite chime of a hotel front desk line either. It was sharp, old, and grating, like a rotary phone from decades ago. Each shrill note rattled through the empty motel like a scream. I sat there frozen, breath shallow, praying it would stop. It didn't. The laminated rules were pinned right above the phone. I didn't even need to look. I already remembered rule. Fucker 3. Never answer the phone after 2:13 a.m. I checked the clock. 2:14. I gripped the edge of the desk so hard my knuckles ached. The voice I'd heard, low, breathy, impossible, still echoed in my mind. Answer the phone. I didn't move. Then the ringing changed. The sound distorted, warping into something less like a phone and more like laughter. I backed away from the desk, eyes darting between the phone and the cameras. The monitors were static-filled again, every feed useless except for one, the hallway camera. The man was back. No, not back. Closer. He stood just outside the front desk area now, the faint outline of his long coat barely visible in the flickering feed. My throat went dry. The phone stopped ringing. I let out a shaky breath, thinking maybe it was over. That's when the light above me flickered, and the phone's receiver lifted itself off the hook. Slowly, like someone was on the other end. I stumbled back, my chair toppling over behind me. The sound of breathing, deep, ragged, came from the earpiece, filling the silent room. You're breaking the rules. The voice wasn't human. It was layered, like 3 people speaking at once. The words vibrated through the walls, through my bones. I wanted to run. I really did, but something kept me rooted there, staring at the phone as it dangled from the cord, swaying slightly. The voice came again, louder this time. Turn around. I didn't. I couldn't. The rules were all I had, the only thing between me and whatever this was. I clung to them like scripture. Don't look at him. Don't answer the phone. I hadn't picked it up. That had to count for something, right? The monitors flickered, and suddenly the figure was gone again. I grabbed the flashlight from the floor and forced myself to breathe. The phone clicked softly as if hung up, then silence fell over the motel again. I thought maybe I'd passed some kind of test, that if I just sat back down, stayed calm, made it to sunrise, I'd be fine. Then I heard footsteps. They came from the hallway camera's blind spot, the corner the feed never showed. Slow, deliberate steps, each one closer than the last. I crouched behind the counter, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. The sound stopped. I risked a glance over the desk. The lobby was empty, the front door still locked, snow piling high against the glass. Then came the knock. 3 sharp knocks from inside the motel. My heart slammed against my ribs. The sound wasn't coming from the front door. It was from room 6, the same room with the permanently closed curtains. Rule. Thucker 5. Keep the curtains in room 6 closed at all times. I crawled to the monitors and switched the feed to the exterior camera outside room 6. The snow reflected the dim security light, but there was nothing unusual, just a dark window, curtains drawn. The knock came again. I couldn't help it. Curiosity gnawed at me, louder than fear. I grabbed the master key Frank had left me and crept down the hallway, flashlight beam trembling against the peeling wallpaper. The motel was dead silent, but the air felt charged like a storm was about to break. I reached room 6 and stopped. The door looked wrong. It was wet, as if moisture seeped out from the cracks. My hand hovered over the doorknob, shaking. Then, the phone rang again. The sound echoed through the hallway, impossibly loud, like the ringing was coming from inside my head. I spun around, disoriented, and the beam of my flashlight flickered across something. A shadow. He was there, standing at the end of the hallway, perfectly still. The phone stopped ringing. The man didn't move. I bolted. Sprinting down the hallway, I slammed back into the lobby, locked the office door behind me, and dove under the desk. My chest heaved as I clutched the flashlight and waited. Silence. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I couldn't tell anymore. I was shaking, whispering to myself to just hold out until sunrise. That's when the office door clicked open. No footsteps. No key turning in the lock. Just a slow, deliberate click. The light above me went out. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to stay still. The air in the office grew cold, so cold my breath turned to mist. I could feel him there, in the darkness, standing over me. And then, in a voice softer than a whisper, he spoke. "You're already dead." Something icy brushed against my neck. I bit down on a scream, squeezing my eyes shut, refusing to look. The flashlight flickered in my trembling hands, casting a weak beam across the floor. There was nothing there. The lights flickered back on, blinding me. The office was empty. The door was closed again, locked from the inside. I crawled out from under the desk, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The monitors hummed softly, and one by one, the feeds returned to static. Only one camera was clear now. Room 6. The curtains were open. Someone was standing at the window staring out. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. My flashlight beam landed on the laminated rules, still pinned to the wall. For the first time, I noticed something new, something that hadn't been there before. A 7th rule, written in fresh black ink. Rule number 7, he is in your house. I didn't even remember breathing after I saw those words. They weren't typed like the others. They were scrawled in jagged handwriting, the ink still wet, smudged where it dripped down the laminated sheet. I read it again. Rule number 7, he is in your house. The motel wasn't my house. That was the first thought that jolted through me, icy and sharp. But I knew what it meant. It wasn't about the motel. It wasn't about tonight. It was about me. About home. Somehow, this thing, this nightmare man, wasn't trapped here. He wasn't tied to the motel or the rules on that wall. They were more like warnings, guidelines, a desperate attempt from someone before me to keep him at bay. And if rule number 7 was true, then I'd already lost. The screen for room 6 flickered again. The figure at the window was gone. I ran. I didn't think, didn't check. The monitors didn't even bother turning off the lights. I just grabbed my coat, shoved open the front door, and bolted out into the snow. The icy wind slapped me in the face as I sprinted toward my car, slipping on the ice. The motel loomed behind me, its lights glowing like a trap. I fumbled with my keys, hands numb, breath coming in ragged gasps. My headlights cut through the snowstorm as I started the engine. I didn't care about the job, about the pay, about Frank. I just needed to get away. The road was nearly invisible beneath the whiteout, but I drove anyway, tires skidding, heart hammering. The motel disappeared in my rearview mirror, swallowed by the snow. For a moment, I thought I'd escaped. Then the phone rang again. Not the motel phone. My phone. The screen lit up on the passenger seat. No number. Just one word flashing across the screen in bold black letters. Answer. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop in the middle of the deserted highway. My hands shook as I reached for the phone, hesitating. I remembered the voice from earlier, that impossible, layered voice. You're breaking the rules. I let it ring and ring and ring. Finally, it stopped. I exhaled, trembling, and tossed it into the back seat. I drove the rest of the way home in silence, checking my mirrors every few seconds, half expecting to see that faceless silhouette standing on the roadside. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the storm had let up. My house looked the same as always, dark, quiet, safe. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, snow melting off my boots onto the welcome mat. That's when I noticed it. The smell, wet soil, iron. The smell I'd noticed in the motel lobby when he was standing behind me. I froze, hands still on the doorknob. My living room was dark, the air heavy, oppressive. Something was wrong. I whispered to myself, "It's just in your head. It's just fear." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I locked the door behind me and crept through the house, flicking on every light I passed. The smell followed me from room to room. It wasn't coming from one place. It was everywhere. When I reached the kitchen, I saw it. Another laminated sheet taped to the fridge. Same font, same style, but only one rule written on it. Rule number 8, stop running. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back, knocking over a chair. My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. Someone had been in my house. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a kitchen knife, and backed toward the hallway. I was shaking so hard the blade rattled in my grip. That's when the lights went out. All of them. The entire house plunged into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using the flashlight to scan the hallway. Every sound was magnified. The creak of the floorboards, the whisper of wind outside, the pounding of my own heartbeat. Then I heard it. The knock, 3 sharp knocks, coming from upstairs. I knew I should run, get out, find help. But my legs moved on their own, carrying me up the staircase step by step, the flashlight beam trembling across the walls. At the end of the hallway, my bedroom door was slightly ajar. The knocking came again. I pushed the door open. My bedroom was empty, the curtains drawn tight, the bed neatly made. But there was something on my pillow, a small, white card. I crept closer and picked it up, my hands trembling. 2 words were scrawled on it in the same jagged handwriting as the rules. Look up. I froze. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me, I tilted my head back. He was on the ceiling. The nightmare man clung there like a spider, his faceless head tilted toward me, his long coat swaying gently though there was no breeze. His limbs were too long, too thin, stretching out like shadows. I screamed and stumbled backward, slamming into the dresser. The flashlight flew from my hands, spinning across the floor and plunging the room into darkness. Something cold brushed against my arm. I bolted. I didn't remember running down the stairs or tearing out of my house barefoot into the freezing night. I didn't remember getting into my car or the way my hands fumbled with the keys as I sobbed. I just remember driving. Driving with no destination, no plan, the taste of blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my lip. I checked the rearview mirror over and over, but the road behind me was empty. By sunrise, I was miles away, parked on the shoulder of some back road, too exhausted to keep going. I thought maybe I'd escaped again. Maybe I'd bought myself time. Then I saw it. Another laminated sheet taped to my dashboard. Same handwriting, same rules. But there was only one now. Rule number 1. Don't look at him. I reached for the paper with trembling hands, and that's when I noticed the shadow fall across the hood of my car. Someone was standing in front of it. I didn't need to look to know who it was. So I closed my eyes, and I'm still sitting here, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel, afraid to open them, afraid to see him, afraid to break the only rule I have left. But I think he's getting closer.